All right, let's go ahead and get the exhaust manifold off of here. I did loosen these up with a breaker bar prior to busting out this electric ratchet. Now we do have some longer ones it's looking like, so I'll try and keep these together with their respective parts. Just for reassembly, gonna have to get some new hardware anyways. It actually does not look like we broke one off. That was the one in question, but it looks like we might have gotten lucky, and that's just a bunch of corrosion down in there. That one looks good. That one looks good. That one looks good as well, and that one looks good. So, nice, no snap bolts. We got both of the manifolds off. Surprisingly, no strip bolts. I think the only thing I can attribute that to is soaking these down with PB Blaster, which you can see the kind of stain area there, for a few days in advance. The only thing we did have go wrong is I did notice a crack here in the passenger side exhaust manifold. I don't know if you can see that. The camera's not picking it up too well, but we will have to address that. My plan is to basically braze that with a bronze rod, or yeah, there you can see a little bit better of an angle. So I don't know if that happened just now during disassembly or what, but we did get a little crack. The block's mating surfaces actually look pretty good, so we'll probably just clean those up with some emery cloth or something. And who knows, we might have to end up taking some of the stuff to the machine shop anyways, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's go ahead and get this distributor out of here. This is gonna be a 1/2-inch hex bolt on the back, and it's just held down, it's just holding down the distributor clamp. So we'll go ahead and take this bolt out. You can also see I've labeled all the spark plug wires and where they go just for easy reassembly. So we'll get this out of here. Go ahead and pull these wires. Alright, there. Gonna have to pull this off, which these are coming off anyways, so just get the retainer out of the valve covers. That on there halfway. All right, get that out. Just pulling this out. Get that out of the way. All right, and there's our distributor. All right, we're working on taking the PCV breather off. It's just a little hose clamp that holds it on here. So that's the back side, and then here's the front of it. So typically this would go to the carburetor in the factory configuration, but I have this ran into the intake manifold, mainly due to this position of the hose. It was getting crimped when I had it ran into the back of the carburetor. So this just gives the hose a little bit more of a straight line to the intake manifold to suck all of those extra crankcase gases out. This is directional, so we probably will put a tag on this just so we know which side goes where. The PCV breather only works one way. Now we'll go ahead and get the water crossover off. The reason that this is like this is I bypassed the heater core because it was getting so hot in the summertime. So this just helps keep it cooler inside the cab. This also may have contributed somewhat to our overheating problem because there was one less basically place for all that heat to escape to. So let's see if we can get this one off. All right, there's that. Let's see if we can get this side off. This one's gonna be the hard side. We got it loosened up a little bit. Let's see if we can pop this off. You can probably see the rust coming out of the bottom of this hose. Oh yeah, that was pretty gunked up, so this may also have been contributing to the overheating issue. Next, we can go ahead and get this intake manifold out of the way. These are just 9/16 hex bolts, and some of them are also studded, like this one right here. You can see are a little bit different, so just pay attention to where they go. The fully threaded hex bolts are on the outside, and the studs are on the inside. All right, let's get this heavy old thing off of here. All right, and now you can see my crappy copper RTV valve gasket job. I need to clean that up, so we'll go ahead and take these off. I do have new intake manifold gaskets coming. They should be here today, in fact, so we'll see if those show up. All right, we want to get the shop vac and clean some of that water from where I pressure washed it before we take the valley cover off. And we'll go ahead and get this intake, the alternator bracket off just to make it a little bit easier to access all of this. Probably gonna need a socket for that one. All right, there we go. And we can just leave these bolts in there just so they don't get lost. That one went there. All right, good stuff. We'll tag this, get back to it. All right, we got the water out of there. Let's go ahead and get this valley pan cover off. I actually suspect the oil leak was coming from the back of the valley pan cover here because I did not use a gasket. I was being a cheap bastard and I used copper RTV instead. So we're definitely going to put this together with a gasket when it goes back together. And hopefully that will cure the massive oil leak. Because it didn't used to leak oil that bad until I got in here to do a lifter inspection because I thought the lifter was ticking, and then that actually turned out to be that hole in the exhaust I was showing you guys. I believe we'll know when we put everything back together, of course. Let's pop this off and see what we got here. All right, there it goes. And that looks like it always does. You will notice this baffle here. So this is how this goes together. The baffle sits like that, and there's also a spring underneath of it. And just looking at this, there's water here in the crankcase, so that's not great. This probably came from when I was pressure washing it, but that means we're gonna have to drain the oil out. I was hoping to save the oil, being cheap again, so yeah, anyways, let's go ahead and get this cleaned up a little bit. Next, we can go ahead and get these valve covers off. One of the things I like about this motor is how easy to work on it is. You can see there's just some wing nuts holding the valve covers on, so it makes it really easy to get in here and do any maintenance that we might need to do, which is quite often, unfortunately, with this old truck. All right. One important thing to note on this rocker arm assembly, you can see it's a fixed rocker shaft. This specific bolt right here is actually the ones that brings the oil up to the rocker shaft assembly, the push rods and the valves. You can see, if my camera will focus, well, not really, but you can kind of make out this bolt says rear. So this one has a hole in it. We'll see that when we pull these rocker shafts off. And then these are your 3 front bolts right here. So it's very important, the orientation and the direction of assembly when we put this back together, to have this bolt in the exact same position. Let's go ahead and get these rocker shafts off. I am going to use a 6-point socket just because they are starting to get a little bit rounded. I guess the heat has made these soft over the years. And we also want to do this in increments so that we don't bend this rocker shaft. So we'll just slowly go through here and release the tensions on the bolts a quarter at a time or so. And that's going to give us less possibility of damaging anything as we take this apart. Just leave this rocker arm assembly completed with the bolts in it, just so that we don't lose anything. And you can see there, maybe, the hole in that bottom bolt. These are new push rods, so if you're wondering why those look newer than the rest of the block, this one had a severely bent push rod. The timing chain actually blew out from the factory, so this had a nylon cam timing gear in there, and at some point it threw the time and messed up the push rod. So I put new push rods in here. Couple things, just, you know, as we're coming through here and just looking at the overall health of this motor. This valve stem right here is worn pretty thin. You can see there's like a nice little divot in there where the light's shining off of it. This one as well. So It's definitely due for a valve job. I don't know if you can see in there, but they're pretty corroded and have a lot of gunk on them. This side we haven't gotten off yet, so we'll hold off on our prognosis there. And we'll just take a quick preliminary look at the valves. As you can see, those are pretty crusty. That's the exhaust port, exhaust crossover, excuse me. Come around to the other side, see what we got. Yep, just more of the same. Crusty old valves. Back on the 327, we're gonna go ahead and get these air injection block-off nuts out. Some of these 327s came with basically a system that would pump air into the exhaust manifold and give a bit of a scavenging effect. This was back in the 60s when some of the emission standards were becoming a little bit more rigid, so the Jeep didn't have it when I inherited it. These were just basically pieces of pipe that someone had kind of blocked off or crimped off or whatever. So these are a much better solution for that, but still we've got to... Next, we can get this water crossover off. And it hasn't been that long since I've had this thing off, so hopefully it'll just pull off without too much hassle. Let's see if I can get something in there to pry it a little bit. Yeah, there it is. Alright, good thing we got some new gaskets for this. There is an O-ring right here. This one looks to be in good shape. I mean, I just replaced this not too long ago, so we're just going to leave that in there. We're not going to touch the front of this water pump or anything like that. Although I do think we're going to put a 180 thermostat in here at some point in the near future. Alright, we're about ready to pull this head off. I didn't show the bolt removal just because I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I'll show it on the other side for sure. Well, good thing I caught that. So there was 2 alignment dowels here. Right here and right here. Looking at our head gasket, I mean, it's definitely worse for wear and pretty flat. I don't see any signs of a failure. All right, let's take a look at our cylinders. As you can see, we've got a lot of carbon buildup. The ring ridge actually, it's not terrible. I'm not catching a fingernail on it, so that's good. Let me wash my hands off and we'll get in here a little bit deeper. All right, let's see what we got here. Not a lot of cross-hatching left. In fact, the cylinders look like they may be a little bit scored. So there might have been a little piece of trash or something that went through here at one point. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. Yeah, that's actually kind of a good frame. You can see kind of the vertical striations there. Well, nothing we can do about that, so we're going to put a new head gasket in and call it a day. While we still got a little bit of sunlight and y'all can see what I'm doing, we're going to go ahead and get this other head off. So we're going to need to take these off first. These are the studs for the valve cover, but they double as the head bolts as well. So we'll just take these wing nuts off real quick. And you can't get a deep well socket on there, unfortunately. So we're going to have to improvise, and we'll just do the old wrench trick is how I got the other side off. So let's see which way do we need to be going. That's it right there. Seat it on there as best we can. I'll hook up this guy like this. Can't get this one off. There it goes. And just a little bit. Alright. There we go. There's that side. Right, so now we're going to attempt to clean some of the sludge out of this block. See how well that goes for us. Got some mud coming out now. That's what we wanted to get out of there, all that junk. That's what we're looking for. That's why we were overheating. Blow all this crap out of there. All right, y'all, let's take a look at these heads. You can see we've got a pretty decent amount of carbon buildup in some of these chambers. The main issue was, I did this off camera, so you have to excuse me. I filled the cylinder heads up with gasoline and they failed a leak down test. So we basically just puddled up some gas in there and it was leaking down through the valves into the chambers. So that tells me that we're not making a good seal on the valve seating surface. So what we're gonna do is lap these valves today. It's a really cheap fix for this problem. Hopefully it at least improves the situation a little bit, if not entirely resolves it. So let me change the camera angle a little bit and we'll show you how guys we're gonna do this. All right, after a brief intermission to fix my neighbor's boomerang, we're back here, we're about to disassemble this head. So did want to talk a little bit about this valve spring compressor tool. It seems based on the reviews on Amazon and some YouTube videos that there's a little bit of a misconception on how this tool works. And even I have a hard time figuring it out. Some people say that you're gonna use this lever to compress the valve spring, but I don't think that's the most effective way to do it. You don't have a lot of leverage, so an easier way to do it is rely on the constant and steady pressure of this spring here. So let's go ahead and install this. The forks are going to go over the valve spring and the valve spring retainer keeper, and then we're going to just compress it with the lever there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start threading this screw in, or the T-handle as some folks call it. And if the valve spring doesn't want to release immediately, we can just tap it a couple of times with the nylon hammer and you can see it just released there. So that'll save you a hard time of trying to get it to release just based on this screw or the T-handle alone. And another thing to keep in mind is it's better to keep this screw threading lubricated. It is under a lot of tension, so you'll save your hand if you keep this thing lubricated with some PB Blaster, W40, or even some Vaseline or anything like that. It'll make the job way easier. As you can see, I can actually do it with one finger, even though it's a little bit difficult because I'm not having a good grip, but otherwise you'll be having to really wrestle this thing. But it does make it really easy, and you can see the valve spring is starting to compress there. So we'll get this into position and then take a look at it here. So here's what we've got. The spring is compressed. The valve is bottomed out against the bottom of the T-handle here. And then the forks compress the valve spring retainer, or the valve spring, and then the retainers are accessible, I should say. Let me find my magnet and we'll get these things out of here. Actually, we might not even need to. We might just be able to, yeah, they're just gonna fall out. Okay, so our valve spring retainers are out. That's all that keeps them, the little keepers. And we're just going to back the pressure off of this and then release the valve spring and the valve spring retainer body. So we've got the tension off the valve spring. We can go ahead and pull this off. It's just going to slide right off of there. And then what you're left with is the valves. What you're left with is the valve stem seal. This is a positive type valve stem seal, and I'll show you what we're going to be replacing it with, which is one of these Velcro umbrella type seals. I'm actually using both of them, and I'll show you that when we get to the install part and why I'm doing that. But let me just go ahead and pull this intake valve out. And you can see that it's got quite a bit of pitting in there, and the valve seat is also fairly pitted. So what we're going to do is we're going to lap these valves with some of this valve grinding compound. And I'll show you how we apply this. It's some pretty abrasive stuff. It starts out as low as 120 grit and will go up to 220. So you don't need a ton on there. And you also don't want a bunch left over when you finish the valve grind. Otherwise, all that's going to get sucked down onto the cylinder wall, and it's going to be like sucking a bunch of sand up. So I'm just going to do 4 small dots on basically the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock position, I guess that would be. And we're just going to go ahead and put that back into the head, and then I'll show you what we do next. All right, close enough. So now we're going to take the drill and attach it to the back of the valve stem. And we're just going to slowly, on low speed, just run this drill. And you can see it's turning the valve in there. And every so often, we're just going to push forward and redistribute that lapping compound. Here's the bottom of the cylinder head view. Just going to spin this around, and you can see that lapping compound on there doing its job. Pretty interesting stuff. Basically, what we're trying to achieve is a smooth mating surface for the valve seat and the valve. I guess you call that the valve face. All right, then we're gonna go the other way. And this stuff will grind down as you're using it, all the way down from 120 to 220 and maybe even 300 or something. You can kind of feel it starting to wear a little bit thin. So we'll keep that up until we get a good clean mating. All right, and we can just spray the valve off and rinse some of this excess compound off with a little bit of carburetor cleaner. And what we're left with is a nice clean mating surface. And you can see we've still got to clear off all of the gunk back here. I don't like spraying the carburetor cleaner directly in there because I feel like it blows it back into the cylinder head. So I just kind of wipe it clean with a paper towel. And you can see we've still got a little bit of a rough edge. So we're actually going to sand this one again. And that's what we're looking for. Nice clean mating surface. You can see we've still got a little bit of pitting right here and there. That looks like a little bit of lapping compound. Or it might be some more pitting. Yeah, the thing is you don't want to over grind these. Really the valve seats need to be replaced in this, but I'm just not wanting to spend the money on machine work. But you can't grind this valve down to where it's not going to seat well at all either. You can kind of see the face compared with the top of the valve and then the valve body here. You don't want to just wear this one surface so thin that it no longer has the correct angle. You need to solve this on a machine, but this is going to help us for at-home engine rebuild. So let's go ahead and get this reinstalled, and we'll show you guys how we're going to do that. So as I mentioned, we're going to be using both the umbrella style valve stem seal and the positive style. You can kind of see how this goes together if I can do this one-handed. Alright, you can kind of see how this goes together. The umbrella style just slides right over the positive style valve stem seal. And when this is moving up and down as the camshaft actuates, it kind of works together, it seems to me. And I don't really trust these 100%. They feel a little bit more cheaply made than the positive style valve stem seals, but these are the factory ones, and these are worn out. So I guess 2 half-assed valve stem seals will make 1 whole one. So that's basically what we're trying to accomplish here. So let's go ahead and get the valve stem spring and the retainer body back on there, and we'll get this thing compressed, and we'll put our retainer keepers back in there. And one other thing I wanted to mention about this tool, it does seem like it makes a difference in performance as far as to which side you mount it on. The side with the most clearance between the head and the valve spring compressor seems to perform better when it's kind of like at this angle. If it were up here, it seems to not want to work as well. So just FYI, it's going to have to go with this orientation. And it kind of has like a little bit of an angle on these. You'll see if you use this kind of tool. And yeah, that's basically all I want to talk about. So we're just going to repeat the process 15 more times, 2 valves per cylinder. This is a V8, and we'll get back to you guys. All right, I did want to show y'all one of these exhaust valves. As you can see, it's pretty crusty, got a lot of buildup on there, which to me is an indicator that this motor is burning oil. That will typically happen through the valve guides, which are the metal tubes inside the head, or the piston oil ring. I'm leaning more towards the latter, just based on the scoring patterns on the inside of these cylinder walls. But I'll show you guys that in broad daylight when it's a little bit better lighting conditions and easier to see. But let's go ahead and finish these heads up, and I just want to show you guys these exhaust valves. We're just going to go ahead and chip some of this off with a flat blade screwdriver and a razor blade. Just clean them up a little bit. We're not going for a race car build here, so just trying to make it run a little bit better with what we got. One thing I wanted to show you guys real quick, you can see we've got new freeze plugs in the engine installed. I took those out just to help flush the block, so we've got all new freeze plugs in here. It's looking real good, but this specific plug right here, this 1 5/8 one, is actually not a freeze plug. This is the camshaft oil seal. So I failed to realize that when I was taking this apart, and in the process of getting that out, I actually marred up the camshaft a little bit and also may have caused some slight damage to the camshaft bearing right there. I'm not 100% sure what the outcome of this is going to be. We're going to replace this, but just FYI, you do not need to replace that one when you do the freeze plugs. You can leave that one alone. All right, the project manager polishing up the valley pan. All right, so we're going to apply the gasket shellacking compound to both sides of the head gasket here. Line it up on the dowel pins. Alright, so we're going to torque the cylinder head down. The cylinder head bolts need to be torqued in sequence. So we're going to start with the centermost head bolts. That's going to compress the head down onto the block deck, and then we'll move out to the outer ones. We're going to start at 35 foot-pounds of torque, and then we're going to do a second torque at 65 foot-pounds. There we go. Alright, now we'll just go through a final check from front of the block to the back just to make sure we got all of them.
Don't forget the one with the dipstick.
This part. And now, for those last two, where did those wrenches go? For the last two, since 65 is going to be a little bit tough to attain just by using this one wrench, we're going to put the wrenches in this configuration so that we can get a little bit more leverage on them. Alright. Alright, and that's it. Our head is installed. Next, we're going to clean the rocker shafts up, make sure that we're getting good oil flow through those, and then we'll work on installing our valley pan gasket, our intake manifold, and the rest of the bolt-on accessories. We got all of our push rods installed in the same order that they came out in. These are really easy to install. They just slide down, and then you want to make sure that they seat all the way into the lifter cup, and that's basically all there is to installing the push rods. So let's come over here and take a look at our rocker shafts. We need to give these a good cleaning, but really the way to do it would be to take this snap ring off, pull everything out, and clean it from the inside out. However, I saw a dude on YouTube, Harley Stillwell, that's building one of these trucks. He actually broke the rocker shaft in the middle here when he was trying to clean it and disassemble it, and these are very hard to come by, so I think just based on the risk to reward outcome, it might be better just to clean the outside, soak it in a little bit of kerosene. Hopefully that loosens up any gunk. Spray it out with some compressed air. So that's going to be my plan of attack. So we've got our quart gasket installed, as well as the oil baffle cover. There's a spring under here that you need to make sure to install in the correct sequence. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that real quick. So that just holds the tension onto this. Basically, it just prevents the oil from splashing around and keeps everything lubricated. I did use a little bit of super glue to hold this gasket down as recommended in the Felpro manual and in the TSM. So we'll wait for that to dry, and then we'll install the valley pan cover over here, which we got cleaned up courtesy of our project manager. And you can see that shellacking compound kind of seeped through, so I'm assuming it did the same on the other side. So just a word of caution, maybe use that a little bit sparingly. It didn't dry hard, so I don't think we'll have any issues with, like, you know, entering into the pistons or something and seizing them up or whatever. But yeah, basically it just is there to prevent any leaks or form a perfect seal. So we'll wait for this to dry. I've got the rockers soaking in a little vat of kerosene. You can see we cleaned that one up pretty good. And then I'm hoping that the kerosene will just loosen up the inside little stuck bits. So I've just been kind of actuating the rocker arms a little bit and trying to work that down in there, soak them a little bit. We got our valley pan cover installed. Torque spec on these bolts is 30 to 40 inch-pounds. All right, now we're going to install our cleaned up rocker shaft assembly. We've soaked these in a little bit of kerosene and cleaned them up. So these have a little dowel locator pin on the bottom. We'll just go ahead and make sure it's facing the right way first off. And then we'll go ahead and drop this down into there. And you can see it kind of just clicks in there. So now let's go grab our hardware. So we've got our rocker shaft hand tight. We've installed all of our hardware. And the next thing we're going to want to do is make sure that all of our push rods are riding in the rocker arm cup. You can see that one was kind of misaligned. This is very important so that we don't bend the push rods or damage the lifters. We need to make sure that these stay seated throughout the installation process. I have my torque wrench set at 35 foot-pounds, so we're just going to gradually go through and tighten this a little bit at a time. What you don't want to do is bend the rocker shaft when you're installing it, so it's very important to gradually tighten these a little bit at a time. So we'll just keep working our way down, and you'll feel when they start to bottom out, and that's when you can put your final torque on it. But we just want to apply gradual pressure. So there we go. We'll torque this one. Make sure our push rods are still seated correctly. that's all there is to it. We can see that our push rods are still riding in the rocker arm cups, just as they're supposed to. So we know we've done that correctly. The only other thing to do now is to get the motor installed, and we'll check to make sure that there's oil coming out of these oiling assembly holes. So that's all there is to installing the rocker arm shaft. You also notice we put the intake manifold back on. I didn't film that just because, again, my tripod's broken and it was hard enough getting this thing on there to begin with. Word of note about the intake manifolds, these are cast iron, so they want to kind of bend and deform when you take the tension off of the bolts, which makes it very difficult to get it back on there, especially when it doesn't come, especially when it's not off of the vehicle from the factory. So this 4-barrel is actually off an AMC Marlin, and so the mating surfaces kind of mend to each other, whereas with this one, it's kind of formed to the block of a different car, and this one originally had a 2-barrel intake on it. So just kind of know that you're going to have to massage these into place, especially if it's an aftermarket intake manifold. That's where some of the aluminum intake manifolds, newer technology is nice. It doesn't deform as badly, so you don't lose any alignment when you take the bolts out. So just a little FYI there. You might have to work this thing a little bit to get it into place. But we got our spark plugs in. We did those hand tight plus a quarter turn. You can see we've got our spark plug wires numbered, so those will be really easy to install. We'll get those plugged back in, put the valve covers or the valve covers and then the exhaust manifolds back into place, and we should be about ready to take this thing off the engine stand, install the clutch, and then put her back in. All right, you want to drop it down a little bit? Not a ton, but just a little bit. All right. Go ahead and drop it in a little bit more, I think.
Well, I can't.
Why?
Because I'm over here holding this.
I can hold it. Can't is a powerful word, young grasshopper.
Well,
Don't limit yourself to your
I really
own
don't want
mind.
to drop it, because if I do, there's a cord hanging there, and that exhaust manifold's going to catch it and rip it.
What cord is it? All right. All right, hang on. All right, you can come down with it. Alright, keep going. Keep going. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Let's see. 2.
How y'all doing?
Good, how about you? All right, we need to pull the machine back a little bit.
Think?
I think so. All right, hang on. All right, now drop it down just ever so slightly. Yeah. Keep going. Alright. Alright, hang on. This exhaust manifold is just hitting in the way. Shift it over to the
You want me to lift it up?
I don't know yet. Alright.
Now what?
We need to push it forward a little bit, as straight as we can. Here, take this pole and jam it up under the bottom of it and use it as a lever.
I'd rather use the other one because it's going to mess up my pole.
I don't care about that.
What, you going to buy me another?
It's just the jack lever. Alright.
More?
Yep. Alright, hang on. Let me get up under there and look and see how far off the input shaft we are. You can stop recording for just a minute. Alright, hang on. Let me see. We're trying to line up the input shaft with the splines on the clutch. So we're a little bit misaligned right now. We need to grab the floor jack and jack up the back of the transmission here. You can see our angle is just kind of a little bit wonky. Now we're at the point where the tip of the input shaft is just about inside the engine. We need to make sure that our splines are aligned, which it looks like we need to rotate the input shaft about 5 to 10 degrees clockwise. All right, y'all, we got the motor reinstalled. Everything's hooked back up, carburetor, ignition coil. We got the water outlets hooked up, radiator. We don't have a battery in it yet. The power steering's hooked up. The whole 9 yards is hooked up. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to test fire it in this video. We had a little bit of a complication with the pressure plate, which I'll show you now. So we can see the factory pressure plate is about 3 inches, maybe a little bit under if I tighten it up just a little bit. It's kind of hard to measure this, but yeah, about 301. But if we come down here under the Jeep, we can see that the pressure plate that was included in that clutch kit is about probably 2 1/4, 2.5 inches. So effectively what's happening, you can see that the clutch is actually pushed in right now. The throwout bearing is barely making contact with the clutch levers, so it's not allowing the clutch to disengage at all. I called Impact, which was the clutch provider, and they basically want me to pull the transmission and measure the distance from the clutch fingers to the flywheel or to the clutch plate. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull the transmission, which I don't want to do, but I'm trying to think of it positively. At least it'll be a good video for you guys to watch about a removal of a T89B transmission. I appreciate you guys watching. We're going to go ahead and knock this video off here just so I can go ahead and get it out. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Hopefully y'all enjoyed and this was informative for y'all. And we'll see you on the part 3 of this video, which is going to be the transmission removal. Hopefully I can get into it this weekend and we'll get a new video out for you soon. Appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.